Hey, g'day guys, it's Legge here. I'm really excited today. I'm seeing Ken Ware at the Neurophysics Institute down here at the Gold Coast. He's agreed to help us create some content to help you, and you know who you are, the guys with the stress and all that sort of stuff. We're going to break the cycle. We're going to work out ways of letting your body know when you're in stress mode and how to actually get out of that stress mode so we can do all the other things. Remember, you're either in survival mode or thrive mode, and we want to do some thriving. I'm lucky enough to come down and spend some time with Ken Ware today. I made a call because I've got back into doing some consults, and I've spent a lot of time researching all sorts of stuff from gut health and sleep and stress and everything. I spent 20 years doing naturopath, trying to prescribe herbs and spices and everything to remedy things. But there's a very important part that everyone must understand in a holistic system. Our body cannot afford to wait to see what our stress is. I'm seeing so many people, and I'm talking to so many people about, they're wanting supplement protocols, or they're wanting tools or even chemical straitjacket to help manage symptoms. And then I'm asking them questions about, how do you know you're stressed, or how does it happen? They'll tell me, my shoulders go up and my toes curl up, and my eyes, people tell me that they think that I'm about to go psycho and launch an attack, or these guys will tell me that they get stressed and they want to just smash it out at the gym, so they go in with all this, cranking the music and angst and aggression. And I'm trying to explain to people that when we're stressed, when we've got gut problems and immune problems, and we watch the news or go outside and interact with the environment, all of these things are sending signals to our body of potential stress triggers. If you are holding on to a stress posture, or if your body's immediate response to any one of these triggers is to initiate some sort of a stress posture, which a stress posture, for example, may be, getting up onto the balls of our feet, ready to launch an attack, or, the traps forward to protect our chest and heart, or, get that hair to stand up on our back and scare away the predators, or, long-term memory is handy, but short-term memory is not handy during stress. Far vision, where am I going to run? I'm not going to stop and read a map, sleep, shagging and reproduction. Of course, those things aren't going to help with stress. So a lot of people come to me wanting fix with digestion, sleep, hormones, reproduction, and memory and nootropics. And the whole time I keep asking them about their stress and all their different stresses. And I find it so damn important for people to acknowledge how important our posture is onto our stress response. And not just our stress response, but our perception of how bad that stress is, or how acute or chronic that stress is. For example, if you are holding that posture as if you're about to punch something and run, even if it's your phone, but it could be something else, you could be sitting there ready to go, but you could be doing that same posture. When something bad happens or your immune system's activated, your body will manifest a greater stress response. Now, if that keeps happening every day until eventually this posture's stuck, because you're doing it at the office, you're doing it on the phone, you're doing it at home, you're doing it when you're walking through the shops, you're doing it when you're walking down the street. Every time the phone rings, every time a trigger happens, this same posture happens. And if you are not aware of it and letting your body know that I am not actually fighting that stress right now, then you're going to be stuck in that stress mode. You can't get out of it. So I can go and prescribe a heap of supplements, and that'll help to manage your symptoms, or it'll help to activate, like I can give you a bit of herbs to improve your digestion by letting your stomach know you're about to eat. The other thing that I need you to be doing is to drop your shoulders back, relax, not be eating on the run and everything, to actually allow this stuff to work. I can go and try to boost your immune system, but if your body thinks you're under stress, it's going to alter how your immune system functions. I can try to reboot your liver, but if your liver thinks you're under stress, it's actually designed to handle venoms and poisons, not just clean up our hormones. So everything changes if your body can't get out of stress mode. Ken's going to run through and show us some little tricks, just ways that you might be able to just increase your awareness of where you may have some imbalances, and that sometimes is enough, because as soon as you're aware, even what we've said just now, being aware of your posture when you're in stress, just being aware of it, sometimes you go, oh, cool. So we're going to show you some tricks and ways that Ken taught me to actually get out of my head maybe and into my body and actually calibrate my body back into a position where it's sending signals back to my brain saying, hey, we're not stressed, by the way. Oh, we've already assessed this stress. We feel that we don't need to run. I don't need to punch and I don't need to go anywhere. We're all kind of cool. In fact, I'm back on my heels, my shoulders are back, my face, look at me. Do I look stressed? Nope. So that's what your body's doing. And then your brain goes, man, this guy's in control. He's cool. Your severity of your stress responses go. Then your ability to use some of the other systems, such as digestion, detox, immune, and all those sort of regeneration, repair, reproduction, shagging for fun, you know, all that sort of stuff can actually happen again, as opposed to you feeling as though you're in a life-threatening stress situation constantly and you're having to constantly assess, is this really bad and do I need to be doing something or can I chill and relax? You know, so that's what we're going to hopefully get for you today.
So there's only one of two rules. Well, I'm either going to be in a state of growth or I'm going to be in a state of protection. So this would be my growth posture, chest out, shoulders back, and this would be my protective posture. So if somebody threw a ball towards me and I went like that, well, I'm adopting that protective state. And of course, in that state alone, just with that posture, we're referring to that, and we say looking at all the causes that could be causing a person to have some anxiety, the system itself can't harvest the information from the outside world that it needs to maintain its degree of complexity. So, you know, generations gone by, they well and truly understood the role that posture played. It was all intuition, of course. They just thought we would function better physically and emotionally when we have good posture. And even to the point that, you know, depression, back in when I was a young person, they would be most likely to say, oh, for goodness sake, pick yourself up. Look at the way you're walking around. No wonder you're depressed. They would relate the physical posture of the person to the elevation of depression. And it can be asking that question, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg? You know, so was the person, did they neglect their posture in some way? And then as a result of that, anxiety tends to build up within the system that can be converted into other types of things. And we can see some, you know, quite ordinary things happen as a result of that. As soon as the person drops their posture, so getting into what we call posture neglect, that's when we see this occurrence where the system winds itself, starts to wind down. So it's like a dimmer switch on a light, more or less, where it winds it down, but now it's in an agitated state. So now there's no correlation between what's taking place in the trapeze. We see heightened activity up in the trapeze area, which is more the fight or flight pathway. And as likewise in the abdominals, but they're not correlating that well. So everything starts to wind down. But even from a non-scientist, if we're looking at putting those files, if we had 30 seconds of a person with good posture and then 30 seconds with a person with posture neglect, and you'd put that into an Excel format, we say, well, the person, when they had good posture, it might be 65 megabyte file. They adopt a poor posture, now we've got 52 megabyte file. So it means there's less processing, there's less data points within that system itself. So now there's been a loss of complexity with the system. And then long term, we always just talk about disease, disorder, despair, or whatever the case may be, as a loss of the system's complexity. So we need to do things to stimulate that complexity gain. And so even our visual system, you know, if we're standing out in the paddock, we can see all these wonderful things in nature out there now. But if you thought you've seen a snake withering the grass in the distance, you know, we don't stand like this. We go, ooh, what's that up over there? We perk ourselves up. And it's not because I've gained an extra inch in height that I can see. No, when I do that, that's what my senses start to become back online again. So now I can elaborate more on what's going on out there. So posture is the number one rule. So posture, if we look at the neurophysics therapy model, posture, emotions, and environment, but posture's first. Posture is how we emotionally elaborate on the environment. For us, it's all about perception. How we perceive our world is how we're going to be responding to it. So when we start to take people through some of these exercises and all they've got is a very mild weight, all they're being asked to do is relax, close their eyes and go slow with it, that's when we start to see the emergence of all these underlying anxieties that shouldn't be there because they're in a safe, supported environment. They have all the controls. There's no lions running around the room, but we see those underlying anxieties. That's their default. That's how they're interacting with their environment all the time. So now they're perceiving non-noxious environmental stimuli as noxious. Right? So whether that be something at an emotional level, so they're out there experiencing the world, they're having conversations with people, and all the time there's this background of defensiveness. So they're seeing the information come in for what it is and maybe perhaps hearing it for what it is, but how's it getting downloaded into the system? that's where all these errors occur. And the system becomes more and more anxious because the innate nervous system, it knows exactly what reality is.
Yeah.
But that gets in conflict with the subjective evaluation of those realities for the person themselves.
Yeah.
So it's that conflict. So, we look about turbulence in the system, for example. Turbulence is a result of competing energies, conflicting energies. So that's what we got going on, the subjective evaluation, and then we got the reality, the real version down here. It takes a fair bit for the system to generate what we would really call anxiety. So people, oh God, I'm really anxious today, I've got this such and such to go to. That's not anxiety, that's just some anticipation type of issue. Right, but when it comes down to anxiety in that sense, it takes long-term stimulation of the area of the brain where we experience fear, long-term stimulation from that particular pathway over to another area of the brain called the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, and that long-term stimulation, that's what generates the feeling of anxiety.
Yeah.
So if we're going to look at helping a person deal with anxiety, perhaps we need to look at what are the underlying fears that could be driving it. But in reality, we don't need all that data. We don't need that information. We just need to see how is the person responding to the environment through the way that we go about things and doing other little really simple things. They can learn a lot about themselves as to how they're responding to the environment without the aid of anything like this, which is some of the things we're going to go through today. But how they're responding to their environment, and then it's all about moving on. Right, now we've got the information, now we know what's good. Right, we did such and such, this is how the person responded. Well, we need to change that algorithm. So we need to start looking at what do we need to import into this landscape to be able to get a heightened sense of self again, regenerate, generate those particular pathways, because the sense of self at the bottom end of the day, that's everything.
Yeah.
How we perceive ourselves. When you look at self-esteem issues or your sense of self basically meaning the same thing, and you ask the person, so out of 10, what is it? When people start saying 2 and 3 and 4, and yet they're walking around navigating through their environment like that, that's really not good. As human beings, our nervous systems are very sensitive to some initial condition. It's just what a system, if I talk about the traffic coming back from the coast on the weekend, for example, and everything's running nice and smoothly and everybody's doing the right thing, and if somebody starts putting their foot on the brake intermittently at the front of this stream of traffic, now we have a traffic jam 10 kilometres back, because that builds up exponentially. Just all the reflexes from all the individual people. So that flow of traffic is sensitive dependent upon some initial state. And our systems are too, and we seem to say, okay, well, let's just have a look at what some of these initial conditions look like. So, as I said before, when we have a person doing some form of exercise and they're starting to exhibit some level of anxieties, now we're seeing the initial conditions that are giving rise to how they're functioning, their 3D version of themselves. But it's beautifully simple, because if we go back and we just twig this a little bit, and all of a sudden the person can learn to go through that same experience, the same environmental stressor, but now they're starting to get some control and authority over that. Yeah. They're stopping when they're having these feelings of anxiety, stopping, calm things back down again. They're getting up into that amygdala and that whole area up there, and neurons that should be reporting safety and comfort have somehow crossed over and are telling porcupines to the cortex, and the cortex has been agreeing with it. But there's incredible plasticity in that area. And just from the person stopping and through their executive reasoning and functioning, calm things down. Okay, there's the anxiety, and stop it, calm it down. So every millimetre matters going through that. And then we come in through another pathway. And we see that these different emotional responses come about through that different pathway. So there's this whole narrative up there that makes Matt and Ken and all that sort of thing. And by coming in through these different pathways, it starts to identify all the different types of stressors or the different perceptions that we have about different things. So certain machines will elicit more than others. And we exhibit certain behaviours on one, defensive things on one machine that we might not display on another. And they're showing certain biases and about different types of stresses. We have to learn to be able to get rid of all those biases and prejudices. So I was saying to people, if I was sitting in another room monitoring their arousal, I shouldn't know whether they're applying the stress to themselves, whether it's coming back again, whether on this machine or that machine, because they've learned how to calibrate themselves and take control and authority, through all these different experiences they're having. Yep. And that puts them in really good stead then when they're out in their real world, navigating the real world, because they've got all these what we call stable reference points. And unfortunately, most people walking the street don't have too many stable reference points, so they basically become unpredictable in some type of crisis situation. where we can look at a person going through and say, oh, there's a higher degree of predictability and certainty about how this person's going to deal with X, Y, and Z. And then, of course, when we increase the load and the demand by increasing what people would call the weight, because the weight is just more information coming into the system, that increases the stress signal in the system, and they learn to be able to deal with stress very significantly in a very composed, orderly fashion. One of the things that we're always complicates things quite a bit is the fact that our systems are designed to maintain their patterns of behaviour. So, good, bad, or indifferent, it really doesn't care what that actually is. It's only if we subjectively say, well, I don't want this anymore and I want to make a change. But so if anxiety comes into play and then you start to perceive your world more through that lens, which is what takes place, your body doesn't care, just goes, yep, this is what Ken does from now on in. So he does every single thing it needs to do every single day to maintain that status quo. So therefore it's going to take conscious effort to pull yourself up out of that attractor landscape to be able to modulate that into something that you're getting a lot more control over. So you're not going to get hit with a stick that's suddenly going to make it happen. You've got to make some changes. Okay, man, so I'm going to ask you to have your eyes closed. And now, even though we're talking about people being able to do these things themselves, it's just, even if somebody else was to do it with them, just to be able to get a bit of feedback and just to show them where the vigilances arise. And we don't know too much about ourselves until we're put in a situation where we are being relaxed, and then see how well we go with that relaxed state when things are starting to occur. But it certainly can reveal the fact that we tend to be a little bit disconnected from ourselves in that respect. So remember, it is what it is. Whatever's going on for Matt at this point in time in Matt's world, we're going to see some resemblance of that down here. Like I said, without knowing the details of it, but we can certainly see the effect that it actually has on your psychophysical system. So hands down by your side there now, and just super relaxed, just like you're trying to go to sleep. And so I'm going to be moving your legs back and forth, adducting them and abducting them. So butterflying them, we call that. And as I'm doing that, I'm sending an equal signal up to both hemispheres of your brain. So we have your right and left right hemisphere runs the left-hand side of your body and vice versa. So when I'm doing that, so it's giving me some feedback then as to what each hemispheres are doing. Are they talking to one another? Are they dealing with this, what's coming into their system in a very collaborative manner? Or is there some degree of separation for it? And this is when we can typically start to see that there might be a hemisphere dominance. So Matt's the very willing person here that's volunteered to do all this. So we need to run the program for a little bit and just see what emerges over time. So all the time you're just thinking about going with the flow. And I'll randomize it. So this is a very highly sensitive pathway. As you imagine, I'll just briefly show that if something comes into this space, we're going to slam those legs together pretty quickly. So you don't try and do anything, Matt, you just let me do it. But a very, very important pathway. There's so many interconnections up here, because this particular pathway, it's responsible for 360 degrees of movement and balance in space-time. Our groin is there as well, which is that area of protection. So there's a connection there through all those fear centers of the brain and so forth. Okay, Matt, now I'll ask you to do that by yourself. You carry on by yourself. So not too bad. And so this is a really fundamental movement. And a lot of the times when we're children, we just sit there and we just flop our legs back and forth, and we don't think about it one little bit, because that's just the system itself generating these type of fundamental movements. It helps to keep the brain nicely calibrated and so forth. But then we get all big, and then we get stressed, and then when we try to do something as simple as this, all of a sudden there's a degree of awkwardness and the legs aren't coordinating properly. And the more stressed the person is, the more likely you're going to see they're not able to facilitate this as well as what they should be able to. But then again, this is one of the things. Okay, so that's some measurement that's giving us an indication of where the system's at, and their anxiety and all that's interconnected with that. But if we make this very big change here and all of a sudden we can facilitate that nicely, then the anxiety simply can't be there, because it needed the system to stay in that other state to maintain the same. Now just inhibit your right leg, Matt, and just do it with your left leg. That's it. So the ability to inhibit is very important as well. And this can often sometimes reveal a hemisphere dominance where it doesn't inhibit as well. So again, this is something we need to do. And you see Matt having a little bit of trouble here, but again, always appreciating whatever we see happening, it's always interconnected to the rest of the system's overall state of being. And by changing this and upskilling the system, you're changing that whole atmosphere. So we're going to inhibit the left leg now and do it with the right. And then we can take a measurement now and say, oh, was that easier to do than the other leg? So what do you think?
It feels like it. I just want to cheat and look.
Yeah, no, well, it looks like it's coming a lot easier.
Yeah.
Now then, so we inhibit the right leg and do it with the left leg again.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of disparity there, but it can be the fact that, you know, all of a sudden we have this left hemisphere dominance, and where the right leg's wanting to kick in all the time. It's stopping from that experience of being able to move that smoothly there. So remember, the left hemisphere runs the right hand side of the body, and we can see it trying to kick in there to help. Again, we need these hemispheres to be on the same page and to be able to do the same thing. So anything, like I said, keep saying, if there's any anxiety or any other type of disruption to the system, it would need Matt to keep making these same errors. But if we prune all that, and eventually it doesn't matter whether I'm doing it with my right leg or my left leg, there's a degree of sameness about it all. And that's what we have to experience, that degree of sameness between the left and the right. And putting this bit of focus on, and you notice that the more a person thinks about it, they try to overthink it, the more complex, the more errors are going to occur. So just that real ninja thought and letting it happen. And of course, not to be frustrated if things aren't going well, because that doesn't help one little bit. It's just doing what you need to do to get it right. But the important factor is here. You can just stop there for a second, Matt. Important factor is, because like I said, these muscles here are responsible for all our 360 degrees of movement and balance. When the person's walking around, if you're seeing any of those disparities, it simply means that every time they put their left foot down on the ground, the brain has a different experience to when they put their right foot down on the ground. So we need to, that's not good, because now the system's naturally going to start to be in a tentative state because it's not reading that very well at all. Again, interconnected to everything else, but if we start to balance that out, we're getting that degree of sameness about it all. That's when the system's going to start to move more freely through the environment and experience the environment in a much more bilaterally stable manner. So the key words. So now we're going to do some proprioception. So the proprioception test would be, you know, sitting up nice and tall, coming across your body nice and slow and steady, and getting those fingers together like I did then. Lucky I did that then. No, I know my finger's there. I know the tip of my nose is there. I know I can go back to my finger and so forth. So it tells me then that there's architecture up in the brain, there's structure up in the brain that's reliable, it's consistent, and it's functioning properly, because the only way you can do that is for the hemispheres to be working together properly with one another. So when we see that there's errors in proprioception, because proprioception is just nested within the overall perception of the person, the perceptual landscape, we know that there's errors in all other levels of percept that the person's making. Now, they're not purposely going out and making false perceptions about things. It's, as I said before, it's how it gets downloaded into the system. They see it for as it is, they hear it for as it is, but as it gets downloaded, that's when these errors start to occur, and that's what starts to cause that turbulence we mentioned before. But again, if we tidy that up and we get some measurement, so things aren't going that well, but all of a sudden we start to tidy that back up, now the system has got that reliable structure and function back into place, and you've got evidence that neurons in the brain are firing differently to how they were before. Therefore, the disease, disorder, despair, whatever the case may be, can't be there like it was before, because it needs that other math to do it. So we'll have a look at your proprioception. So nice and slow when you're doing this, and everybody else is going to do this, they should be doing it slow. So just bring your arms up a little bit higher. It's away. Now closing your eyes and just relax. Thinking about your rest of your body in space-time. Okay, yep. So we'll get them together there. Okay, now this is important now. So now we've got them together. So now by pushing on your fingers there, Matt, so pushing on your finger and focus on what that point there. So imagine calibrating yourself around that point physically and emotionally as if it's the only point in the universe that matters. And effectively, you are actually developing a reference point up in the brain, a point of reference for this brain to refer to. So the hemispheres connecting, putting the output of one finger gets fed into the other as input and vice versa, so they can cross-talk up in the brain. We can focus on that. We can then think about how things are going on in the rest of the body because we've got the hemispheres connected there. And we can start to look at what do I need to do to shuffle myself around a little bit so I get a better sense of being centered. And then when we move away from that point again to take your arms out wide, you maintain focus on that point as if your fingers are still there more or less. So back we go again. That's it. So it's a beautiful experiment because every single point in space-time matters. Everything has some influence over some trajectory, physical and emotional trajectory within our system. It's very good, yep, so you're very close, so you're much better, but there's pruning had occurred, okay? So we'll leave that on there, but the point is making, like, you started to see that there was a higher level of accuracy about all that. So now we're going to go from one finger at a time to the very tip of your nose, and make sure you find the tip of your nose when you do get up there. And back to the finger again. And not too bad that side, yep. Not too bad at all. So we allow for some standard deviation. Remember where you put that last finger. So don't despair. Whatever you see when you're doing this yourself, don't despair about what you see, because remember the beautiful thing about it, you're just getting a bit of an idea of how your overall perception is. And then from there on in, it's just a matter of pruning, just taking away all those possible things that could be happening and pruning it into something that's much more reliable. Because the other thing that becomes evident about this is when we're doing it, that it creates a sense of uncertainty when people don't quite know where their finger is or they're uncertain about it. But uncertainty is a scale-free phenomena. It means that if we're seeing uncertainty at one level, the person is more or less living with lots of degrees of uncertainty in other aspects of their life. So by just getting one thing right, where all of a sudden, now I know where my fingers are, now I'm really certain with it. We've taken away all those degrees of freedom, we've brought about a degree of certainty within the system that then has a migrating effect across the rest of the system as a whole. So we're thinking about this beautiful grid that, again, that gravity supplies. So we just got that little bit of bias over that left hemisphere bias, as I mentioned before, Matt. So that probably feels a little bit weird for you there, does it? Yep. So you've got to get rid of anything that's telling you that that's not normal, because that's where you should be. So we've got to think about ourselves in this grid with all these vertical lines and horizontal lines and so forth. And it's courtesy of gravity that grid. So there's structure. And once we start to see reliable structure and functionality return back through doing a simple thing like this, that's going to play a significant role in the alleviation of so many other unwanted types of errors that the system's causing, and anxiety can be certainly one of them. So the message is here to, if you're feeling a little bit anxious, a bit out of whack at any point in time, go and practice your proprioception, and very quickly you're going to start to see that there's going to be relaxation straight away of those particular symptoms. Okay? So now we're going to do the wonderful thing. Then we probably need you to be out here this time, Matt, because this ground isn't that even. It's got a bit of a slope in there. So you're facing me now.
Yep.
So we sort of have that persuasion back on your heels because of the slope in the ground. If we could be inside, it would be a little bit easier to do this. So now we're going to do the mat leg standing on one leg experiment.
Okay.
Here we go. So we're going to watch him leg it.
Right.
Okay, now, so we're going to start with our eyes open.
Okay.
So remember, now, we got to get, instead of being really serious about stuff, we got to get more like childlike with things and when we're doing it. So if kids were asked to do this, they'd be having a whale of a time.
Oh, yeah.
So when we're standing on your right leg like so, well, the information's going up, you're lifting your left leg up to do so, but the inhibition of that left leg is just as important as the leg you're standing on. So if the leg the person's standing on isn't doing so well, you can't blame that leg because it can be the other one that's not doing its job of inhibition properly, wanting to step in. So it takes a collaboration between both the hemispheres to be able to stand on one leg at a time beautifully, right? So we'll start with your left leg actually, and we'll lift your right leg. Yep.
Lift my right leg, all right. Eyes open.
Yep. That's it. So you're taking some measurement of yourself and just try and move your knee away from the middle line a bit. That's good. There we go. Now think about how beautiful it all is, being processed and everything's coming in. Yep, everything's nicely organised there. That's the way. Then you put that right leg down and you lift your left leg up. And again, and take it away from the midline a little bit. That's good. And you think about, well, did that feel the same when I did that? Is it pretty similar, one to the other?
Feel all right?
Yep. Yep. So again, thinking about all this beautiful processing, all this information coming in. That's it. Good work. Yep. So now we're going to do it with our eyes closed.
All right.
We should be trying to transition straight into that without too much effort.
I needed a pole there. My eyes were shut.
It's not too bad, yeah. But again, just let your system, so I have a lovely talk in a second about all this. That's it. Okay, now we'll have a bit of a chat before we do the other leg. So this goes to show how visually dominant we've become, not just Matt, but as a society in general. We've got all our technology, we're getting into this foveal type of posture all the time, we're taking in all this information. And as a result of that, neurons that should be working on other things, reporting information coming from the body, they start to get stripped back. A lot of the neurons up in the brain in terms of our associations pathway are multimodal, so they can do different jobs, but all of a sudden they're not doing different jobs anymore. Now they're transferring over to just be able to deal with the visual system. So it means that if we can't stand on one leg at a time and the same as we can with our eyes open, then our visual system has been lying to us as we're walking around, right? Yeah. So there's reporting errors because it should be the same. So, and again, like I said, we get this visual dominance. As a matter of fact, when I look out into that world out there, the 270 degrees of awareness that I have over that landscape, in 1 square metre of it has about 140 pixels per square metre. When I'm looking at my mobile phone, that's 540 pixels per square inch. So my brain has to depixelate that to make sense of it all. So therefore it has to bring a lot of dedication in to be able to do that. And of course, long term, that's what happens. But then again, it's the posture that you see people when especially the kids are on their phone, they think they're having a whale of a time. They're looking at their phone and they're texting their friends. The whole time their trapeze are engaged. Their traps are tensed up. They're in that protective. It doesn't matter what they think they're doing or how they're doing it, their system is adopting that protective posture. And then that becomes the long term. So we have things about emotional withdrawal from the environment and all that because it's feed into from the emotional regions of the brain too as a part of the associative experience that we actually have. So we've got to be aware of that. But it doesn't matter. And again, we're taking some measurement. If we see inconsistencies here, that's tied up with all the other things that are going on in the person. Beautiful thing is here, if we calibrate this and all of a sudden now I can stand on my leg with my eyes closed and there's no difference between when I'm doing it on my left or right, well now this system has really upgraded itself, especially when I can get that other leg and start to move it around in more complex manners. Okay, so we'll do the other leg now.
All right.
So,
can't remember which one we did.
So we did your left leg first, so your right leg now with your left knee up. That's it. That's the way. Yeah, so you're not too bad. You're not too bad.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Just the whole thing about don't overthink it. So now we can have another little discussion. See, now we have these other beautiful laws of nature on our side in terms of the laws of energy conservation. So if I'm going to set a pendulum off swinging, that pendulum's going to keep losing energy until it finds its lowest energy point, which is at the bottom of the system that it's nested in. Because that's the rule of energy conservation. If I stand up and I put a smile on my face and I let my system do whatever it needs to do without trying too hard, you know you need to rescue yourself when you have to do it, but just let it go through those, it'll go through all the conformational states it needs to do until it finds its lowest energy point again, which is where it's the right thing to do, okay? Because that's the law. So we don't have to, we've got all that on our side. The law says energy must be conserved, so that's what we're working with.
And that gravity.
And so, and when we fully understand that and we can sort of just work with that, and go with the flow in that sort of sense, you know, get a smile, doesn't matter what happens. But these are things that we should be practicing if there are issues of concern with anxiety, stuff like this every day, twice a day, just because you can, not because you have to, you're not putting yourself through any type of therapy. It's just a really good idea to do this stuff.
So that was awesome session again. I thank you, Ken, so much for providing that, not just for me, but what I'm so excited is I get to share these tricks with you guys now. These techniques that Ken has taught me has changed my life. And now you get to try some of these things as well. I'm not saying you have to do them all exactly the same way I do them and you're going to experience the same things I experience, but I want you to play with it, I want to feel, I want you to become aware of your body, and we're going to get as many of these sort of experts like Ken creating this sort of content that we can help supply you with more and more techniques that you can use as part of your health journey. The holistic system that we're working on, we have to have everything covered. We can't just be looking at supplements, foods, intensity of training. We've got to be in a holistic system, and these are the techniques that I'm going to get from people like Ken and other people that are going to supply them to you, so that way you have all of these techniques that I've learnt over my life within this health industry.